Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this unique unit deep dive, we're going to be looking at the Jurchen's archery range unique unit, the Grenadier, who, if nothing else, add a lot of explosions to Jurchen gameplay. Beyond just a summary of the unit, the main questions here are whether or not it's a worthy replacement for the hand cannon in the Jurchen's tech tree, as well as how impactful their unique tech is in Imperial Age. Going into this, I actually had fairly low expectations for the unit, but have greatly changed my opinion after seeing it in action, and I think it'll become clear why. To start with a general overview, right away it's pretty gold intensive, costing a modest 35 food, but then 70 gold per unit, which is unusually high for something that isn't siege or heavy cavalry. For that high cost, they have pretty low HP and armor, with a very slow and inaccurate attack, which deals blast damage. Backing that up are some decent bonuses, a +9 against infantry, along with a bit extra against spears, something against rams and trebuchets, as well as somewhat unusually for an archery range unit, +4 against buildings. There are some obvious parallels to the anti-infantry bonus and slow fire rate of hand cannoneers, but also invokes the slinger, with both having minimum range, while the blast radius aspect calls for a mangonel or rocket car comparison, so it's already a unique blend of a few things, but clearly best utilized against large groups of infantry. In terms of bonus damage it receives, just like a hand cannon, it takes bonus damage from anything anti-archer, like skirmishers, or anything anti-gunpowder, with condottieri being the most important, though as a bit of a spoiler for what's coming up ahead, they kind of counter condottieri. Creation speed isn't really an issue, being faster to train than not just hand cannons by far, but also slingers and crossbows, so its clearly high gold cost is meant to be the main bottleneck for massing them. The most interesting and difficult to predict aspect of the unit, of course, is the impact of their blast damage. Here we have Jurchens in blue and enemy targets in red, with an ally in cyan having units nearby. If we just start blasting, notice our own nearby blue units take significantly less damage than the enemy unit beside it, while our ally takes the full brunt. From this, it's obvious that the blast damage is like a mangonel's, where we can hurt friendly units, but Jurchen's own units take half the usual friendly fire from a civ bonus. Interestingly, where mangonels will avoid attacking enemies that are right beside your own or allied units, grenadiers do not show that level of restraint, and friendly fire is almost impossible to avoid to some degree. Obviously, like with any blast damage, one way to offset its effect would be staggered formation, where in this example the pikemen spread out go down about half as quickly overall. It's not used as often as it probably should be online, but is at least one tool the game gives you. Finally, in terms of upgrades, there aren't that many to remember, and like hand cannoneers, they benefit from the archer blacksmith armor upgrades, but not fletching, etc. They also have an Imperial Age unique tech we'll explore in depth in a few minutes, but the big one to remember in Castle Age is siege engineers, which gives grenadiers +1 range despite grenadiers not technically being siege, then also benefiting from ballistics like an archer, but unlike siege or hand cannons. Siege Engineers is probably the most important, as Jurchens get that in Castle Age at a 450 wood discount, and it brings Grenadiers up to 7 range, which is a major threshold as it means they outrange town centers by 1 and won't take return fire. So that's the unit overall, but now let's talk about how this all plays out in some common matchups and what they work and don't work against, or at least which matchups would require you add something else in support. First off, they're not particularly good against other archery range units, and for example, against crossbows with balanced resources, the Grenadier does a decent amount of damage, but can't outright win, though they would win with equal numbers. Likewise, against skirmishers, the bonus damage going on here just makes things even worse, and they also lose against cavalry archers with balanced resources as well, so they're just clearly not anti-archer as a class. Of course, that's not what they're supposed to be. They're your hand cannon replacement in Age Early, so let's try them against infantry. Suddenly, things look a lot better, and with balanced resources and no micro, they can run around a bit because of minimum range, but easily clear out a larger group of pikemen. In this case, they ended with 70% of their HP left, and as tempting as it is to put them on stand ground to keep them in one spot, I actually found that leads to a worse result of more like 50% HP, simply because a lot of them stop firing if no pikemen are in range. What we really want to do though is micro even just a bit, which turns out to be very effective. You can easily have situations you take 0 damage like this, and funny enough, even if pikemen get close enough, the majority of damage is probably from being in your own unit's blast radius, so your own units are if anything the greater threat. Rather than stop micro, I actually found purposely aiming a bit deeper into the enemy formation works better to maximize your damage, and again, it's only when they get close you have any issues because of minimum range. It's not even just pikemen they can deal with, and while Huscarls will be pretty effective once they get close to the Grenadier, as Grenadiers do take the Huscarls' anti-archer bonus damage, if I use a bit of micro, it's very easy to handle a decent-sized group of Huscarls with very little damage taken. The ranged melee units are more able to actually engage, but also run into trouble, as the throwing axemen and Gebetto have the unfortunate combo of standing right in the line of fire, taking bonus damage, while not engaging the Grenadier's minimum range. Clearly, infantry as a class are just in trouble here, which is what we expected. We really can't generalize that to all melee units though, as whether we're looking at fighting knights without micro especially, where the knights don't lose a single unit, or even with micro, knights still have no trouble, assuming the Grenadiers are unpaired with something else in front. Losing 2 first crossbows and then knights tells us Grenadiers alone won't work particularly well in the online meta. While they also deal okay with siege, doing 10 damage to mangonels or scorpions on a direct shot, and have a tiny bit of bonus against rams, make them better than archers, they take just 1 return shot from mangonels, so we can add those to their list of counters. On the upside, they're not that bad against buildings for an archer range unit, as remember they have an extra +4 damage, dealing over twice as much as crossbows over time, lagging a little behind hand cannons, which are obviously an Imperial Age unit, but are still a natural comparison. One thing to watch out for when attacking buildings is friendly fire, either with units near the middle of a town center you're attacking, or melee units along the edge of a building. Notably, the Step Lancer stands far enough back to avoid that, which is one small point in favor of that pairing. In fact, considering Jurchen's other bonuses, a pairing with Step Lancers is a little gold intensive, but pretty natural, letting the Step Lancer deal with the archer and siege weakness of Grenadiers, while that unit can focus on its anti-infantry role. Overall, it's just not that impressive of a unit in Castle Age though, being specialized against infantry, but underpowered for its cost against pretty much everything else. That would be fine, but now let's take a look at the Imperial Age, where things completely flip, and you can make an argument it genuinely becomes one of the scariest units in the game. First off, their list of upgrades in Imperial Age is very small, as you should probably already have siege engineers, and there's no elite upgrade for the unit, with just armor upgrades and a unique tech to pick up, but it's an incredibly impactful unique tech. Thunderclap Bombs cost a fair amount at 900 food and 600 gold, but has 2 effects. The first gives a 15 damage explosion hitting enemy units immediately around each Grenadier that's defeated. Unlike your usual blast damage, this has no friendly fire, and we can see from a quick test that it is reduced by melee armor. Still, this means even when you lose, your units self-destruct, making them automatically better in melee. The more significant effect of the unique tech though is it adds 3 smaller after explosions following your attacks over a small area. The impact of this is substantial, and in this case, here are the values from a direct hit from just your regular attack, with then these secondary explosions adding anywhere from 12 or 19 extra damage on a perfect hit, which in these cases more than doubles or even more than triples the damage they deal against everything from non-infantry, infantry, and buildings. This is an elite upgrade on steroids, and naturally we have to see what this means in practice. Right away, they're far more anti-building, and as a baseline, hand cannons deal about 100 damage per minute against a building with masonry. Grenadiers without the unique tech deal 70, but with the unique tech jump to over 200. A group of 8 end up matching an elite rocket cart, and 12 or 13 match a siege ram with siege engineers, plus you're doing that from range. As for how they do against units, you have to be careful here, as it matters how we consider range. Patrolling them into a balanced resource fight with Arbalesters isn't a winning fight, as the Arbalesters outrange them by 1, and those earlier shots against the Grenadier's low HP snowball pretty quickly, so initially things don't seem like they've changed much from Castle Age. The difference is if we start both sides within range of each other, the Grenadier and its higher damage snowballs instead. The exact same thing happens with skirmishers, where an attack move into the slightly longer range leads to a defeat, but if the engagement starts at the same time for both sides, Grenadiers really show off their firepower. Remember, they're an anti-infantry unit, and these were their counters in Castle Age. If we then look at how they do against infantry with unique tech, it's a horror show, at least for the infantry. Remember, the secondary explosions don't have friendly fire, so you don't have to worry as much about that aspect. And even against Huscarls, just attack moving them against a similarly sized group, they just clean them up, with these secondary explosions doing a ton of extra damage against infantry. Even for the cannoneer, using no micro, it's a pretty balanced fight, despite minimum range creating a lot of chaos for the Grenadiers, and wasting time running around.
Just to emphasize the point, if we do this again without the unique tech, it's a completely one-sided matchup for cannoneer, so it's really the unique tech doing all of the heavy lifting here. To look at one individual unit and what's going on, the cannoneer actually negates all of the anti-infantry bonus damage, so the main shot just does 6, but these secondary explosions add 9 more, so you get 2.5 times what they'd be doing without the unique tech. Even cavalry is no longer an obviously good counter, though of course if you just stand there and let them get into your minimum range, grenadiers will lose with reasonably sized armies. Adding in a bit of micro, even with pretty similar starting numbers, I can win consistently with grenadiers. Paladins do end up having the edge when I tested it out, but even then, things can end up being pretty close, at least with micro. Remember, siege was also one of the most dangerous counters in Castle Age, and again, as long as you have that unique tech, end up going from 2, 3, or maybe 4 damage up to more like 10 or 20 per shot, with rams in particular taking way more damage overall. There's still the problem of being extremely squishy to return fire, so I wouldn't say they counter siege, but reinforces their unique tech, makes them anywhere from 3 or 7 to 10 times more dangerous against those units. For one last way to contextualize the unit, here we have some comparable benchmarks against champions, including fully upgraded arbalesters, hand cannons, grenadiers without and with the unique tech, plus mangonels. If we look at the damage they deal to their target, even the grenadier with the unique tech is only 260-ish damage per minute, while the unupgraded grenadier is downright anemic, even behind an arbalester. Once we start talking about a group of units though, suddenly we're seeing over 1,000 damage per minute from one grenadier, almost on par with a mangonel. I don't think we have to belabor the point, but the main takeaway is the unit isn't dazzling against individual targets, particularly if you just make a couple of them and don't get their unique tech. But with their unique tech against bunched up units, they start to give insane amounts of value, as probably the highest DPS unit in the game outside of Siege. Does that make them a broken unit though? Not necessarily. Jurchens don't even have a win rate of 50% for games lasting over 30 or 45 minutes, and Jurchens themselves have the third lowest win rate in the game, which doesn't scream broken unit to me. There are cost hurdles to both the unique tech and the unit, and the minimum range is pretty exploitable, so you can take them out with your own long-range units, one-shot them with onagers, or just beat them with value by spamming hussars, for example. There's also the friendly fire aspect to the main projectile, and especially if you're using your own infantry as a meat shield and having them fire indiscriminately, are potentially getting less value out of your own melee units. I don't want to oversell that point, as your own units take just half damage, and are not affected by all the extra explosions from the unique tech. For example, here I've removed the attack from my own and enemy melee units, so basically all the attack is being done by the grenadiers other than some minimum damage. Between the bonus against infantry, my own units taking half blast damage, and the extra explosions only affecting the enemy units, the total being dealt to my own is just a fraction of what the halberdiers are taking. Alternately, if we restore these units' regular attack and have 15 grenadiers support 20 hussars against 32 halberdiers, we end up with 14% of the hussars' HP left, which is on net a good trade. If we swap out those grenadiers for hand cannons, we don't just lose all the hussars, but even a few hand cannons at the end, and it's more like a balanced trade. So while the grenadier-friendly fire hurts in isolation, it's easy to overestimate its impact. I admit the type of testing done throughout might make grenadiers look a little better than they perform in practice by ignoring friendly fire, but there's no question in the right situations you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.